Indo-Pakistani crisis, or the conflicts. This will pretty much cover everything immediately after the war in 1971, which is when Bangladesh was formed. So our essential question here is compare and contrast the social and economic consequences of the Indo-Pakistani conflicts for India and Pakistan. So basically what that means is you want to examine the short-term effects, see what they were all about, and then you're going to just want to compare and contrast the two between India and Pakistan. Pretty straightforward, but anyways, so just some general background. The whole conflict was basically between India and Pakistan because they were bordering. So after 1947, they got independence from Britain, so they became two different countries. Now, Pakistan, it was majoritively Muslim in population, and India, on the other hand, was mostly Hindu. So they had a lot of squabbles basically because of their religions. And now the region known as Kashmir, that was kind of in between India and Pakistan. It had a predominantly Muslim population, but it had a Hindu leader, so there was a lot of dispute over who would get that, either India or Pakistan. Now Pakistan really wanted Kashmir, but they went to war with India a few times during the 1947 and 1971 period, trying to win Kashmir. They lost pretty much every war, mostly due to an inferior military. And in 1971, that was when Bangladesh, which was then East Pakistan, they got engaged in a civil war with the rest of Pakistan because they wanted their own independence. So pretty bad war, but India, they decided to get involved, so that kind of escalated tensions. And as usual, Pakistan lost. So the short-term effects in India. Now, India, it was the clear-cut winner. They had clearly bested the Pakistani military, so they were the predominant power in Southeast Asia at that point, or at least towards the Middle East. And now, due to their victory over Pakistan, the people really weren't as concerned about Pakistan anymore. Considering the fact that they had bested their military, Pakistan wasn't so much of a security threat anymore. They were really just there, trying to kind of annoying India. But to India, Pakistan was really just a manageable threat now. And now India, they had a good amount of POWs from Pakistan that they had got in the 1971 war, so they gave them all back. The thing about these, though, was that the Indians, they did treat them correctly under the Geneva Agreement, so there wasn't much controversy over that, but it kind of helped settle tensions. In terms of economic effects, India lost about $2 billion, which is quite a bit, mostly, and that was in a really short period, so big impact on the Indian economy. And India, they did lose respect on the international level. A lot of countries didn't think it was appropriate for India to have actually gotten involved in the 1971 crisis between Pakistan and Bangladesh. So it was 104 to 11 UN members. That was the ratio between people who disapproved and people who did approve India's intervention. So as you can see, there was a lot of controversy over whether India's actions were justified. So now let's examine the short-term effects of Pakistan. So in general, Pakistan was much more unified. The government had good control over the people, and the people were generally content. One big thing was Urdu. That was the official language, more or less, of Pakistan at the time period. The thing about Urdu is that it just showed how unified the people were. Like even in parts of Pakistan where Urdu wasn't that big, it was still played a large part in the language. So all in all, Pakistan, they did have like a common language which shows their unification. And then there was Baluchistan in the northwest frontier province. Pakistan was divided into, I guess, territories, so to speak. And Baluchistan and northwest frontier province, they were two of them. And there was slight discontent. When I say slight, I mean really slight discontent about, I guess, just Pakistan rule there. But I mean, only 3.4% of the Pakistani people were Baluchi, so there wasn't too much discontent. But overall, the people in Baluchistan and northwest frontier province, while there was some unrest, there was by no means as, I guess, traumatic as the area in Bangladesh. So that was another thing that kind of played towards the unity. But Afghanistan, they kind of started developing problems with Pakistan because Afghanistan, they did want these regions in Baluchistan and NWFP. So obviously they began eyeing up those regions, so that kind of just caused slight discontent with Pakistan. Pakistan, they really weren't concerned about it just because they kind of knew they could beat them. And I mean, Pakistan's concern at the time was mostly India. All right, so now let's talk about their leader, Bhutto. So Bhutto, he was the leader of Pakistan after the crisis in 1971, and he brought with him a more what he did to build up his power was he pretty much undermined his predecessors Yahya Khan and Ayub Khan. Now these two guys, they were kind of bad. They used military as their major source of power, and that was kind of what led to the constant tensions between India and Pakistan because the Pakistani government was just very militaristic. So what Bhutto did was he tried to get rid of this as being the major source of power, and he tried to keep it a more civil and docile government, and this did help to decrease tensions between India and Pakistan. And now Pakistan, they did also get foreign support between from China and the U.S., so this kind of helped out their economy after the war, and it did slightly increase tension just because other countries are getting involved in the area. So let's look at the international stage. So the reasons for the U.S. even got involved after the crisis was it was mostly just to balance power. None of the major powers at the time, this was during the Cold War, so they really didn't want to have to deal with another conflict in India or Pakistan, so they did try to go in and intervene a little bit just to balance out the power. And then Pakistan, they also did have a key position in the Gulf area, so it was almost in the U.S.'s interest more so than the Pakistanis' interest to have the U.S. there, just because they would have a strategic place in the Gulf area. And then Pakistan, that was around many of the oil-producing countries such as Saudi Arabia. So having a position in Pakistan would greatly increase their oil acquisition. And then there was some policies of containment because at the time the Soviets were starting to influence a little bit of India and Pakistan. So the USA did try to intervene again and try to keep the Soviets out. Reasons for the Chinese involvement include, just like the U.S., they wanted to balance the power as well. They wanted to keep India and Pakistan content more or less just so they wouldn't have to deal with another crisis. And then they did try to subdue Soviet power as well. So, as I said before, India and Pakistan were starting to get a little bit affected by the Soviets. So, essentially what they did was China, they would allow India and Pakistan to be independent enough to keep the Soviets out, but China didn't want India and Pakistan to be a problem for them. So that was another big thing at the time. And then Iran, they also did have a little bit of involvement in this. The Shah, who was appointed by the U.S., his biggest concern was really over Iranian Baluchistan. He wanted to maintain control over this. So what he pretty much just balanced tensions between him and Pakistan. So Iran and Pakistan, they were pretty buddy-buddies at the time. And then he also wanted a buffer between India and Iran. This goes back to the whole thing about how they really just didn't want another conflict emerging, so everybody just kind of got involved. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about Bangladesh and Kashmir. So Bangladesh, as I said before, it was formed following 1971 civil war between it and West Pakistan. So after this, it had a population of roughly 75 million people, and it really didn't have a stable government. The first guys who tried to step in as the authority powers, they were assassinated within approximately 5 years after they came to power. Then the next regime after that, they got ousted as well. So it really took approximately 3 governmental regimes to actually get Bangladesh stable, so to speak. And then Bangladesh, they also did have a little bit of problem with India. India and Bangladesh, they were kind of enemies, so to speak, but obviously they weren't too bad. So Kashmir, the disputes over Kashmir kind of settled down after the 1971 war. India didn't really care, but Bhutto, he in Pakistan, he still wanted Kashmir to be a part of it, but he didn't want direct Pakistani intervention. So essentially, what he wanted Kashmir to have its own revolution, so to speak, and then join Pakistan. But overall, that's it. Sorry, that's long-term effects. But yeah, so that's that. Yeah, thanks for watching.